The monitor above Lauren's hospital bed beeped steadily as the nurse checked her for one last time. The surgery was scheduled for 10 a.m., and it was now 9:47. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Work email. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. Subject line. Contract termination. Effective immediately. My hands went numb. I opened it with shaking fingers. We regret to inform you that your consulting contract has been terminated, effective today. No explanation. No warning. Just gone. Lauren squeezed my hand weakly. Everything okay? I forced a smile and lied. Just work stuff. Nothing important. But my heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. Trent actually fired me while my wife was being prepped for heart surgery. The cruelty of it took my breath away. I looked down at her wedding band in my palm, the one they'd removed before surgery. My vision blurred. Not now. Please, not now. The surgical team arrived to wheel her away. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'll be right here when you wake up." Then she was gone, and I was alone with that email burning a hole through my phone. I sat in the waiting room, staring at the email, reading it again and again. My fingers moved automatically, dialing Trent's number, straight to voicemail. Of course, I texted instead, "You know my wife's in surgery right now." The reply came within 30 seconds. "Personal issues can't keep affecting work performance, Mark. You made your choices." I read those words 5 times. Personal issues. Like my wife's heart condition was an inconvenience to his quarterly reports. Like her surgery was a choice I made to annoy him. The rage came slowly, building from somewhere deep in my chest. But I didn't throw my phone, didn't scream, didn't call him back. Instead, I sat perfectly still in that plastic waiting room chair, surrounded by other worried families, and made a promise to myself. I would never forget this moment. Not the beeping monitors, not the smell of antiseptic, not the way my hands trembled as I held her wedding ring. And Trent would learn exactly what happened when you pushed a desperate man too far. My name is Mark Dalton. I'm 38 years old, and until 3 hours ago, I was a senior marketing consultant at Pinnacle Strategies. Not just any consultant either. I was the backbone of our client acquisition team, the one who built campaigns that actually worked while everyone else chased trends and buzzwords. For 6 years, I brought in millions in revenue. I'd trained half the staff. I'd stayed late, worked weekends, missed family dinners because I believed in what we were building. Trent Lawson became my director 2 years ago. He was 45, ambitious, and charming in that corporate way where you couldn't tell if he actually liked you or was just managing you. At first, I thought we'd make a good team. He had the connections, I had the skills. But ambition changes people. It turns them into something else, something hollow. Trent stopped being a leader and became a predator, circling anyone who might outshine him. I just didn't realize I was the prey until it was too late. 3 months before the firing, Lauren collapsed in our kitchen. One moment she was making coffee. The next she was on the floor, her face gray. The emergency room doctor used words like arrhythmia and valve dysfunction and surgery required. I called Trent from the hospital that night to explain I need some schedule flexibility. He listened quietly, then said exactly what I needed to hear. Family first, Mark. Always. We'll make it work. I actually believed him. Thought maybe he was human after all. But 2 weeks later, I noticed something strange. My biggest client, Harrison Tech, was suddenly copied on emails to Rick Patterson, Trent's golf buddy, and the weakest strategist on our team. Then another client got reassigned. Then another. When I asked Trent about it, he smiled that tight smile. Just spreading the workload. You've got enough on your plate. I didn't argue. Laura needed me focused, not fighting office politics. That was my first mistake. Assuming Trent had limits to his cruelty. The public humiliation came during our Monday team meeting, 6 weeks before Lauren's surgery. I'd spent the previous weekend finishing a presentation on our quarterly results. Revenue was up 48%. Client retention was at 92%. Every metric pointed to success. I stood at the front of the conference room, clicking through slides I'd built myself, explaining strategies I'd personally implemented. Halfway through, Trent interrupted. Let's be honest here, Mark. These numbers came from Rick's leadership on the Harrison account. The room went silent. Rick looked uncomfortable. Everyone else looked at their laptops. I stood there, laser pointer still in my hand, feeling my face burn. Rick supported the campaign, but the strategy was, let's not get territorial. Trent cut me off. Team effort, right? He smiled at the room. A few people laughed nervously. I finished the presentation in a fog, then sat down and said nothing for the rest of the meeting. But inside, something was breaking. That afternoon, I found Rick in the break room. He couldn't meet my eyes. Look, man, I didn't ask for that, he said, pouring coffee he didn't drink. Trent just keeps putting my name on stuff. I nodded. Wasn't Rick's fault. He was just a tool Trent was using. It's fine, I said, even though it wasn't. What could I do? Report him to HR? For what? Taking credit. That happened every day in corporate America. So I swallowed it, went back to my desk, kept working, kept bringing in clients, kept building campaigns that Trent would eventually claim as his own vision. Lauren's surgery date was confirmed 2 weeks later. I requested a 14-day leave. Nothing unusual. I'd saved my vacation days specifically for this. Trent called me into his office the next morning. He didn't look up from his laptop. 2 weeks is a long time, Mark. You sure the company can afford to wait while you play nurse? The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, speechless, while he typed something, still not looking at me. Finally, I turned and walked out. No argument. No defense. Just walked away. That's when he started planning my exit. I know that now. The morning of Lauren's surgery, I woke at 5. Couldn't sleep anyway. We drove to the hospital in silence, her hand in mine. She was scared but trying not to show it, the same way she'd handled everything since the diagnosis. Strong. Always strong. At the hospital, they prepped her quickly. Nurses, forms consent documents. The surgeon explained the procedure one more time. 40% success rate. 60% chance of complications. We'd heard it all before, but hearing it again made my hands shake. Lauren noticed. She always noticed. I'll be fine, she whispered. And when I wake up, we're getting tacos. Deal. I laughed because that's what she needed. Deal. They wheeled her toward the operating room at exactly 9:52 a.m. I watched until she disappeared around the corner, still waving. Then I checked my phone. That's when I saw the email. The one that ended my career and started something else entirely. Something Trent never saw coming. I didn't scream or throw things. Didn't march down to the office to confront him. I just sat in that waiting room chair, reading the termination email over and over. The details were carefully worded. As an independent contractor, I had limited protections. No severance. No notice required. Just termination. Effective immediately. Trent had reclassified me 6 months earlier. I remembered signing the paperwork, him explaining it was just administrative. Another lie. Another trap. He'd been planning this for months, making sure when he finally cut me loose, I'd have no recourse. No unemployment. No legal standing. Nothing. The surgical waiting area had maybe 20 other people, all of them staring at magazines or phones, waiting for news about their loved ones. Normal people having normal crises. I wanted to scream at all of them that I just lost everything, but instead I sat perfectly still and let the anger turn into something colder, something focused. Trent wanted me broken, helpless, humiliated while my wife's life hung in the balance. He got the timing exactly wrong. Lauren's surgery lasted 6 hours, the longest 6 hours of my life. The surgeon finally emerged at 4:15 p.m., still in his scrubs, mask pulled down. She did great, he said. Everything went exactly as planned. I could breathe again, could think again, could feel something other than rage and fear. They let me see her 30 minutes later. She was groggy, connected to machines, but alive. Her eyes found mine, and she smiled weakly. Tacos, she whispered. I laughed, actually laughed, and kissed her forehead. Tacos, I promise. I didn't tell her about the firing. Not then. Not while she was recovering. She needed to heal, not worry about money or insurance or how we'd keep the house. So I smiled and held her hand and pretended everything was fine. But in my head, I was already planning, already plotting, already building the response that would destroy the man who tried to destroy me. 3 days later, Lauren was home, recovering on the couch with her medications and strict orders to rest. I'd taken her laptop and phone, hidden them upstairs. No work, no stress, just healing. I told her I was working from home on some freelance projects. Another lie. What I was actually doing was systematically documenting everything Trent had done. I pulled up old emails, shared drives, client reports. Started building a timeline. The pattern was obvious once I looked for it. Trent had been inflating numbers for 18 months. Client engagement metrics that didn't match reality. Revenue projections based on accounts that barely existed. Success stories built entirely on work I'd done but credited to himself or Rick. He'd built his reputation on fraud, on my work, on lies so carefully constructed that nobody had questioned them. Until now, I opened a new document and started writing everything down. Dates, numbers, emails, witnesses. If Trent wanted war, I'd give him war. But it would be a quiet war. The kind he wouldn't see until it was too late. 2 weeks later, I met with HR. Not my choice. They'd called me in to discuss the transition. I sat across from Patricia Simmons, a woman who'd smiled at me at company parties but never remembered my name. She slid a folder across the table. Unfortunately, as an independent contractor, you weren't protected under standard employment policies. I nodded, expected this. No severance package? Correct. Your final payment will reflect work completed through termination date. She said it like she was reading a script. Maybe she was. I signed the papers without argument. Didn't mention Trent's timing. Didn't bring up the false metrics. Just signed and stood up. Patricia looked relieved. I'm sorry it ended this way, Mark. No, she wasn't. But I smiled anyway. Me too. I walked out of that building for what I thought was the last time, carrying a box with my desk supplies and a head full of plans they couldn't imagine. Trent thought he'd erased me. He'd actually freed me. That night, I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. I'd built the analytics system Pinnacle used for client reporting. Built it from scratch 3 years ago when their old system couldn't handle the data volume. I knew every back-end access point, every admin credential, every vulnerability. Technically, I shouldn't have had access anymore. But Trent's IT team was lazy. They disabled my email, but forgotten about the analytics portal. I logged using an old maintenance account. Still active. I spent 4 hours pulling reports. Real numbers versus reported numbers. The discrepancies were staggering. Trent had inflated engagement by 30% on average. Some campaigns showed success rates of 85% when actual conversions were barely 40%. He created entire client profiles that didn't exist, using them to pad his quarterly reports. And every fake success story traced back to strategies I'd actually built. He'd stolen my work, inflated the results, and sold it to executives as proof of his genius. I saved everything to an external drive. Then I started planning the next move. I didn't want revenge. Not exactly. I wanted justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional, sloppy, satisfying in the moment but empty afterward. Justice is strategic. It's about making sure the truth comes out and the right people face consequences. So I started small. Reached out to old clients, the ones I'd personally brought to Pinnacle, not to badmouth the company, just to check in, see how their campaigns were performing under new management. The responses were telling. Numbers don't match what we're seeing. Rick seems lost without your input. Thinking about exploring other options. I didn't push, didn't sell, just listened and sympathized and mentioned I was doing some independent consulting now. Within 2 weeks, 3 clients had quietly reached out about moving their accounts. I set up a simple LLC, transferred them over, and started rebuilding. Trent didn't notice at first. He was too busy posting on LinkedIn about transformative leadership and driving innovation. But the cracks were forming, and I was patient. A month after firing, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mark? It's Rick. His voice was quiet, nervous. We need to talk. We met at a coffee shop across town, nowhere near the office. Rick looked terrible. Dark circles, rumpled shirt, the look of a man who wasn't sleeping. Trent's panicking, he said, stirring coffee he hadn't touched. The quarterly numbers don't add up. Executives are asking questions. He keeps telling me to fix the reports, but I don't know how. I don't understand the system like you did. I nodded sympathetically. That's tough. What specifically isn't working? Rick explained the problem. The analytics were showing real engagement numbers now, not Trent's inflated versions. Revenue projections were falling short. Clients were leaving. It's like everything you built just stopped working when you left. Rick said. I almost laughed, because that was exactly what happened. Without me maintaining the facade, Trent's house of cards was collapsing. Wish I could help, I said, but I'm not exactly welcome back. Rick nodded miserably. I know. I'm sorry about how this went down. He meant it. I believed him. But that didn't change anything. That night, I created something special. A mock campaign proposal using everything I'd learned about Pinnacle's current clients and Trent's blind spots. I made it look innovative, cutting edge, exactly the kind of flashy strategy Trent loved to steal. Then I sent it to Pinnacle under a pseudonym, claiming to represent a boutique consulting firm interested in partnership. I knew Trent would see it, knew he'd recognize the value, knew he couldn't resist taking credit for something that brilliant. 2 days later, Rick called again. You're not going to believe this. Trent's presenting some revolutionary new campaign strategy to the board next week. Came out of nowhere. He won't tell anyone where he got it. I smiled. Interesting. Mark, did you? Have a good day, Rick. I hung up and waited. The trap was set. Now I just needed Trent to step into it. And he would. Because arrogant men always think they're smarter than everyone else. Right up until the moment they're proven wrong. Trent pitched my proposal to the board the following Tuesday. I know, because I'd installed monitoring software in the analytics system months ago. Standard practice for troubleshooting. Nobody had disabled it. I watched the presentation remotely, saw him click through slides I designed, heard him explain strategies I'd created. He called it the Pinnacle Protocol, said he'd been developing it for months. The board loved it. Asked detailed questions about implementation, timelines, expected ROI. That's when things got interesting. We'll need comprehensive analytics to validate these projections, the CFO said. Can you provide baseline data? Trent hesitated. Just for a second. Absolutely. I'll have my team pull those reports. But he couldn't, because the data didn't exist. The campaign was theoretical, built specifically to expose him. He'd need to fabricate everything, and fabrication left traces. I designed it that way. After the meeting, I sent an anonymous email to the board. Subject, validation request. Body, before implementing the Pinnacle protocol, recommend independent verification of source data and attribution. System logs available upon request. Simple, professional, devastating. The board requested a full audit 2 days later. I heard about it through Rick, who was now calling me regularly, desperate for guidance. They're bringing in external auditors, he said. Trent's losing his mind. Keeps asking me to verify numbers I don't have access to. What numbers? I asked innocently. Everything. Client engagement, revenue attribution, campaign success rates. He says you must have kept copies of the old reports. I had. Of course I had. Every report, every email, every piece of evidence showing exactly where the real numbers came from. But I wasn't ready to hand them over yet. Sorry, Rick. I deleted everything when I left. Company policy. Another lie, but necessary. The auditors needed to discover the fraud themselves. If I handed them evidence, Trent could claim I'd fabricated it out of revenge. But if they found it independently, trace the discrepancies back to his decisions, his signatures, his presentations. That was irrefutable. So I waited and let the system I'd built do exactly what I designed it to do. Tell the truth. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Trent's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Mark. His voice was different. Smaller. Afraid. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. The board's asking questions about some analytics data. I thought maybe you could help clarify a few things. For old time's sake. For old time's sake. Like we were buddies. Like he hadn't fired me during my wife's surgery. Clarify what exactly? I asked just some baseline metrics. I'm sure you remember the campaign structures you built. How we calculated engagement, conversion rates, that sort of thing. The real numbers are the numbers you reported? The silence was longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. What do you want, Mark? I almost laughed. Want? Nothing from you, Trent. I just want the truth to come out. Everything else is just details. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. I have lawyers, resources. You're nobody now. Then you've got nothing to worry about. I hung up and turned off my phone. Let him panic. Let him scramble. Let him feel the same helplessness I'd felt in that hospital waiting room. The audit findings came out 2 weeks later. I wasn't supposed to see them, but Rick forwarded me a copy. His subject line, "You need to see this." The report was 43 pages of corporate language, but conclusion was simple. Systemic fabrication of client metrics. Unauthorized inflation of revenue projections. Misattribution of campaign success. And every single discrepancy traced back to one person. Trent Lawson. The auditors had found ghost accounts. Fabricated engagement numbers. Reports that claimed success for campaigns that never actually ran. They'd traced digital signatures, email timestamps, access logs. Everything I'd carefully preserved before leaving. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Trent was suspended pending further investigation. I heard he tried blaming Rick first, then the IT department, then a technical glitch in my old analytics system. But the evidence was overwhelming. The timeline was clear, and his signature was on everything. By Friday afternoon, he was done. Suspended without pay, reputation destroyed, career over. The same HR woman who'd told me I had no protections walked him out of the building. Sometimes justice looks exactly like poetry. The board called me the following Monday. I recognized the number, but let it go to voicemail anyway. Made them wait. The message was from Director of Operations, Philip Torres. Mr. Dalton, we'd like to discuss a consulting opportunity. Please call at your earliest convenience. I waited 2 days before calling back. Torres sounded relieved to hear from me. Mark, thank you for returning my call. I'm sure you've heard about recent developments. I've heard rumors. I said carefully, we'd like to bring you back. Not as staff, as an independent consultant with full autonomy. Rebuild what was damaged. Restore client confidence. Name your rate. I let the silence stretch. I already have clients, I said finally. Several of your former accounts. Actually, they reached out when things started falling apart. We know. That's partly why we're calling. You have relationships we need. What happened to Trent? I asked. Torres cleared his throat. Under investigation. Won't be returning. His replacement starts next month. And my contract terms? Whatever you want. Full control, direct board access, performance bonuses. We need you, Mark. I thought about Lauren. Finally healthy and back at work. About our mortgage, our future, the life Trent tried to destroy. I'll send over my terms. I said, they're not cheap. We expected that. My terms were simple. Triple my old rate. Complete autonomy over strategy and execution. Monthly retainer regardless of hours worked. And one non-negotiable condition. Full access to all historical data and systems, with authority to audit anyone's work at any time. The board approved everything within 48 hours. I started the following Monday, working remotely from home. No office, No cubicle, no watching Trent circle like a vulture. Just me, my laptop, and the freedom to rebuild properly. The first thing I did was fix the analytics system, remove the backdoors and vulnerabilities, implemented proper security, created transparent reporting that nobody could manipulate. Then I reached out to the clients who'd left, not to grovel or apologize, just to present honest data and realistic strategies. 3 came back immediately. 2 more followed within a month. By quarter's end, Pinnacle's revenue was stabilizing, not because of magic or manipulation, because of actual work, real campaigns, honest numbers. Everything Trent should have done from the beginning. Rick stayed on, working under my guidance now. He was better without Trent's pressure. Still not great, but competent enough. And grateful. That counted for something. The criminal investigation into Trent took 8 months. I wasn't directly involved, but they interviewed me twice. Asked about the analytics system, the reporting structure, whether I'd noticed irregularities before leaving. I told them everything. Showed them the documentation I preserved. Explained how the fraud worked and how long it had been happening. They were thorough, professional, and when they finished, the charges were serious. Securities fraud for misleading investors with false metrics. Wire fraud for electronic submission of fake reports. Multiple counts, multiple years potential sentence. Trent hired expensive lawyers. Tried to claim I'd set him up, that the evidence was fabricated, that I manipulated the system out of revenge. But the digital forensics didn't lie. The timestamps were real. The signatures were authentic. And multiple witnesses confirmed he'd personally approved and presented the fabricated data. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended once, sitting in the back row, watching him squirm at the defense table. He saw me. Our eyes met. I nodded once. No anger. No triumph. Just acknowledgement. This is what you earned. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. 48 months federal prison. 3 years supervised release. $2.7 million in restitution to defrauded investors and clients. I didn't attend the sentencing. Didn't need to. It was over. But I heard through Rick that Trent's wife had filed for divorce during the trial. His house was in foreclosure. His LinkedIn profile was deleted. Everything he'd built on lies had collapsed exactly the way it deserved to. Meanwhile, my consulting firm was thriving. I brought on 3 associates, all young talent who actually care about doing good work. We'd expanded beyond Pinnacle, taking on clients across 3 industries. Lauren was healthy, working part-time at a job she actually enjoyed. We paid off the medical bills, refinanced the house, even started talking about taking a real vacation. Not bad for a man who'd been fired during his wife's surgery. Some nights, I thought about that morning in the hospital waiting room. The rage I'd felt, the helplessness, the moment I'd promised myself I wouldn't forget. I'd kept that promise. But it wasn't revenge that saved me. It was patience, strategy, and the simple decision to document the truth and let it speak for itself. I saw Trent one last time before he reported to prison. Pure coincidence. I was getting coffee at a place near the old office. He was sitting alone at a corner table, looking at his phone. He looked smaller somehow, older, beaten. He saw me approach. For a moment, I thought he might say something, apologize, maybe, or curse me out, but he just looked at me with empty eyes. I stopped at his table. Didn't sit. I didn't do this to you, I said quietly. You did it to yourself. He nodded slowly. Didn't argue. I know. I could have walked away then. Should have. But there was one thing I needed him to understand. That email you sent while Lauren was in surgery, I'll never forget it. Not because it hurt me, because it showed me exactly who you were. And that clarity saved my life. He looked down at his coffee. I'm sorry. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. Didn't matter anymore. Good luck, Trent. I walked out into the spring sunshine, carrying my coffee, feeling lighter than I had in years. The chapter was closed. The story was finished. And I was free. 2 years later, Lauren and I were sitting on our back porch, watching sunset color the sky. She was fully recovered, back to her old self. We just returned from a trip to Portland, the vacation we promised ourselves. "Do you ever think about what happened?" she asked. "With Trent and everything?" I considered the question. Did I think about it? Sometimes. Usually when I was reviewing contracts or negotiating with new clients. The experience had changed me, made me sharper, more careful, but it hadn't made me bitter. "Not often," I said. "It feels like it happened to someone else." She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you told me." Eventually, I'd finally explained everything about 6 months after it was over. The firing, the investigation, the trial. She'd been angry at first. Angry I'd hidden it from her, dealt with it alone. But she understood why. I'd needed her to heal before I could fall apart. "I'm proud of you," she said, "for handling it the way you did." I smiled. The truth was simpler than that. Trent hadn't just fired me. He'd freed me from loyalty to a corrupt system, from the belief that staying quiet was the same as staying professional. He'd taught me that sometimes the quiet response isn't weakness. It's strategy. And the patient man who documents everything, who builds his case carefully, who waits for the right moment, that man doesn't need revenge. He just needs the truth. And eventually, the truth always wins.